The first year after Chad cheated, I was shattered. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, felt worthless in every possible way, yet I still refused to divorce him. The second year, Chad moved out. He said that if we stayed separated long enough, the divorce would go through eventually. One winter night, Leo came down with acute stomach flu. I carried him through a heavy snowstorm to the while he vomited the entire way. I handled everything alone, barely holding myself together until it was over. The third year, Leo wanted to travel during summer break. Chad said he didn't have time. So I forced myself to be brave and took Leo on a trip by myself. We rode trains through Japan, moving from city to city, wandering, eating, laughing. To my surprise, we had a wonderful time. The fourth year, Chad broke up with his mistress. He said he wanted to come back to the family. I smiled and refused. No. Leo and I are doing just fine without you. Chapter 1. Chad called and said he wanted to meet to talk about the divorce. That was when it finally hit me. We had already been separated for 2 full years. When I opened the door and saw him standing there, I felt strangely disoriented. He lingered at the threshold, slightly awkward. "Can I come in?" I nodded and stepped aside. He slipped off his shoes and opened the cabinet out of habit, reaching for a pair of house slippers, only to find that the only pair left belonged to Leo. I handed him a pair of disposable shoe covers. "Use these. I did a big clean a while back. Got rid of everything we didn't need." "Fine." His reply was low, faintly displeased. But when he'd walked out with his suitcase years ago, he had said it himself, "I'm never coming back." When people leave, the traces they leave behind fade. The things he used were just clutter now, things meant to be cleared out. There was a cup of tea on the table I'd just brewed. Out of courtesy, I asked, "Do you want some tea?" He hesitated, and before he could answer, I remembered. "Right. You only drink coffee. The coffee machine's gone too. I sold it. You'll have to make do." He froze for a second, then said quietly, "There's barely any sign left that I ever lived here." I smiled. "This isn't your home anymore. Didn't you build a new one somewhere else?" Chapter 2. Chad and I had met in college. We'd started as classmates, then became a couple. He was gentle, capable at work, and attentive in daily life. 3 years into our marriage, I gave birth to Leo. I worked freelance, which meant I could balance my job and raising our son. With a nanny helping out, I never felt overwhelmed. And Chad, whenever he got home, would help with chores and spend time with Leo. The 3 of us lived simply, happily. Warm, ordinary days. I truly believed we would stay that way forever. When Leo turned 3, things at home began to change. Chad's parents, who had been living in their old house, got into constant conflicts with a difficult neighbor. Eventually, they decided to rent a place and move in next door to us. I didn't really have grounds to object. They weren't asking to live with us, after all. They were traditional, hard-working people. My mother-in-law insisted on taking over our meals, calling every day to have Chad and me come over to eat. My father-in-law adored his grandson. Smiling warmly, he said, "You're busy during the day. Why don't you let Leo stay with us? We'll take care of him." Before I could answer, Chad had already agreed. "That'd be great. It'll make things easier for you." I swallowed my hesitation. I told myself they were well-educated, kind people, only trying to help. And they were right next door, I could check on Leo anytime. The change did free me from a lot of domestic responsibilities and gave me more time to focus on work. Occasionally, we had small disagreements over parenting styles, but most of the time we got along well. Every evening, when Chad came home, we'd have dinner at his parents' place, chat for a while, then take Leo home and play with him. Life felt full, warm, ordinary in the best way. I quickly grew used to this rhythm, convinced we would go on like this forever. Then Chad began to change. I couldn't pinpoint when it started, but he became obsessed with working out. He'd go to the gym, go for late-night runs. "I need to stay in shape," he'd say. "When Leo gets older, I don't want to be some old guy who can't keep up with him." I didn't know whether to laugh or sigh, so I let him be. Even on weekends, he was often gone. The company's been organizing a lot of team-building stuff lately. Helps with morale. He spent less and less time with Leo and me. But every time he came home, he'd excitedly recount stories from those outings. "You have no idea how intense my team is. One of them almost slipped off a waterfall trying to win first place. I had to grab him before he fell. I didn't want to dampen his enthusiasm, so I listened quietly. Work events were part of the job, after all. Then one day, I happened to see the photos on his phone. That was when I realized the teammate he was so proud of was a woman. The late-night runs and gym sessions, they were partners for all of it. I asked about it casually, carefully. He laughed it off, open and unbothered. She's married. Relax. Don't overthink it. I almost felt silly for even asking. After all these years, I trusted his character, his upbringing. And he loved Leo. His parents lived next door. There was no way he'd do something reckless. But life rarely follows the logic of trust. Sometimes the most naive people are the ones who get hurt the worst. When Leo turned 4, I found out the truth. Chad had been having an affair with that subordinate. And it had been going on for quite some time. Chapter 3. That day was, without question, one of the worst days of my life. I had made a rash investment in gold futures, and when global markets shifted, everything crashed. In just 24 hours, I lost nearly $30,000. The long-term client I'd been negotiating with called that same day to apologize. I'm really sorry. The procurement approval got held up. They're insisting on signing with a larger firm. The double blow broke me completely. Chad happened to be away on a business trip, and I was alone in the house. I made up an excuse not to go to his parents' place for dinner and didn't bring Leo home either. It was late, close to 11. My stomach burned with hunger, but I had no appetite at all. I curled up beneath my desk, lights off, the room swallowed in darkness. Only a faint glow from a street lamp seeped through the curtains. I gnawed at my fingers unconsciously, not knowing how to explain to Chad the losses I'd caused by acting so impulsively. I had no idea where I could possibly find another client of that scale to make up for the deal I'd lost. My mind crawled with anxiety, relentless and suffocating. In the end, I decided to call him. He had a right to know what I'd done. And somewhere deep down, I still longed for his comfort. The phone rang. No answer. I called again. Still nothing. It was strange. At home, he never went to bed before midnight. Why wasn't he picking up tonight? Panic crept in. Had something happened on his end too? My hands trembling, I kept dialing. 5 times. 10. No response. On the 22nd call, he finally answered. But something was off. He didn't seem to be speaking to me. Divorce isn't that simple. She hasn't done anything wrong. My heart lurched violently. That was Chad's voice. I froze, holding my breath, my hand shaking so badly I could barely keep hold of the phone. Could the man I'd lived with all these years really be cheating on me? Chad continued, my parents won't agree easily either. And Leo's still so young. Then a woman's voice came through, edged with resentment. So what am I supposed to do? I can't live like this anymore. I'm getting a divorce no matter what. Chad softened his tone immediately. Don't rush. Even if we do get divorced, it's not something that happens overnight. Why don't we talk about the trip instead? Pick a nice hotel, I'll pay. A trip. Suddenly, I remembered. Just a few days earlier, he'd said he'd be traveling for work for a week. So that was it. He wasn't on a business trip. He was planning a vacation with his mistress. My chest tightened until it hurt to breathe. I clutched at my heart, gasping, forcing myself to keep listening to the intimate exchange between my husband and another woman. And then I heard him say, I don't love her anymore. I'm only staying out of responsibility. Something inside me snapped. I swung my arm without thinking. The phone slammed onto the floor, knocking several books from the shelf beside it. The call disconnected. I wrapped my arms around myself and sobbed until I couldn't breathe. My mind went completely blank. My gaze drifted, unfocused, landing on a children's picture book scattered on the floor. On the cover, the Little Mermaid was dissolving into foam beneath the sunlight, vanishing into nothing. Just like the life I had believed was so perfect, gone overnight, bursting like a fragile bubble, leaving nothing behind. Chapter 4. By the time Chad got home, it was already past midnight. I sat on the couch, eyes red from crying, staring at him coldly. He must have seen the call history on my phone. Somewhere inside me, a final sliver of hope still lingered. I thought he might panic, might rush to explain, might insist it was all a misunderstanding. Instead, he stood calmly at the door and said, "I must have hit the answer button by accident. I didn't mean for you to hear any of that." Then he fell silent. I was shaking with heartbreak. Swallowing the bitterness rising in my throat, I asked, "Why? How could you do this to me?" "To Leo?" He lowered his head, staring at the floor, refusing to meet my eyes. He said nothing. I lost control. I rushed forward and slapped him hard across the face. "Chad, you're unbelievable." Then I ran back to the bedroom and pulled out a suitcase. "If this is your attitude, then there's nothing left to say. I'm taking Leo and leaving." He finally moved, stepping in front of me to block the door. "It's late. Don't make things worse tonight." "It's not that I don't want to talk, I don't know how to say it yet." I looked up at him through blurred, tear-filled eyes. Deep down, we both knew I wasn't really going anywhere. My parents' home wasn't an option. My mother had been sick for years. She wouldn't be able to handle something like this. Once, during an argument with Chad, I'd called her in anger and blurted out, "I can't live like this anymore. I want a divorce." The next morning, my father called, furious, saying I needed to watch my words. One sentence had left my mother so worried she couldn't sleep, and by morning her heart condition had flared up. She ended up in the hospital. From then on, I understood, they weren't a place I could run back to. Grabbing a suitcase was just a way to force him to respond. But what response I wanted, or what path lay ahead, I didn't know. My head was filled with nothing but resentment and pain. Part of me kept hoping this was just a nightmare, that I'd wake up and find everything unchanged. I was wrong. We slept in separate rooms that night. I tossed and turned, thoughts spiraling, asking myself over and over, why? What did that woman have that I didn't? What made Chad forget this family so completely? Even after being exposed, he couldn't bring himself to comfort me, not even with a lie. That was when I realized something terrifying. Discovering the affair didn't mean I could simply confront him and force life back onto its old track. His heart had already drifted too far away. And it wasn't coming back. Chapter 5. We sat across from each other on the couch, neither of us speaking. Chad rubbed his face, his expression worn. "I don't even know how things ended up like this. Maybe after Leo was born, all your attention went to him. And when my parents moved nearby, it felt like the house didn't need me as much, so I started spending more time outside." He hesitated, then continued, "As for her, it just happened. She moved here after getting married. She has 2 kids. Lives in a cramped place with her in-laws. She wasn't happy and would vent to me a lot. At first, I was just being supportive. Looking out for a colleague. But then." He trailed off, unable to continue. I didn't want to hear the rest. "So what now?" I cut in. "You planning to divorce me and marry your perfectly compatible subordinate instead?" My voice came out sharp, louder than I intended. But inside, I was trembling. Terrified he would say yes. Terrified he would admit he wanted out. In that moment, it wasn't the broken love that consumed me. It was the fear of what came next. I had no idea how I was supposed to live. Freelance work gave me flexibility, yes, but when deadlines piled up, I needed someone to help with Leo. For years, with his parents nearby, I'd forgotten what it was like to handle everything alone. And if we divorced, could I afford full-time childcare on my own? My biggest client had just walked away. If I couldn't replace that income, how would I support Leo and myself? How much child support would there even be? How would we divide the house? And if he really married that woman, would Leo become an afterthought? If something happened, illness, school expenses, emergencies, could I handle it all alone? Chad stayed silent for a long time. "I don't know. Before you found out. I never thought about divorce. And now." I pressed. Silence. A sharp pain stabbed through my head. I hadn't slept all night, and a migraine surged in. He noticed immediately. He got up, went to the kitchen, brought me a glass of water and some painkillers. "You should rest. I'll go check on Leo." He avoided the question, then quickly left. I closed my eyes, feeling hollow. I had no idea where to go from here. Chapter 6. In the days that followed, we both avoided the topic, as if by unspoken agreement. There was a fire burning inside me, desperate to erupt, but I was afraid of the consequences. Afraid I wouldn't be able to survive whatever came after. Chad went to work, came home, carried on as though nothing had happened. He stopped his late-night runs and gym sessions. The so-called team-building weekends were never mentioned again. I kept taking on freelance work from home. When I had time, I brought Leo back and took care of him myself. We still went to his parents' place for dinner every evening. Conversations at the table revolved around Leo, and I played along, making small talk with them like everything was normal. When we got home, though, the two of us would sit on opposite sides of Leo in silence, so close in distance and yet impossibly far apart. In the middle of the night, I often woke alone, convinced for a moment that everything that had happened was just a nightmare. But the emptiness beside me in bed reminded me it was all real. I would lie there, tears sliding down my face, unable to sleep until dawn. The cruelest kind of torment is being forced to stand at a crossroads with no idea which way to go. From a distance, it looks like there are endless paths forward, but every road is swallowed in fog, every step lined with thorns. His parents seemed to sense something was wrong between us. On weekends, they often took Leo out, leaving the two of us alone at home with nothing to say. Chad became attentive again, the way he had been before his parents moved nearby. He quietly helped with chores. When there was nothing else to do, I would brew a pot of tea and stream a movie. He would sit silently on the other end of the couch, eyes fixed on the screen. I couldn't tell whether he was actually watching or just staring. Only when the phone beside him lit up would his gaze shift for a moment. He would look at it, then look away, never picking it up. I knew he was torn between this home and the woman outside it. And I, powerless, ached at my own weakness. I couldn't bring myself to leave a man who had already betrayed me. A part of me was still waiting for him to come back, still hoping life could return to what it once was. But he never gave me that chance. Chapter 7. One night, out of nowhere, Chad asked for a divorce. He sat across from me, slumped, looking both pained and strangely sincere. I don't want to lie to you anymore. I never really cut things off with her. I've thought about it a lot lately. Emotionally. I can't come back. I see you as family, as a friend, but the feeling of being husband and wife, it's gone. Please let me go. Let's get a divorce. The words made my chest ache. Over a decade of marriage, reduced to one sentence, let me go. My heart felt like ash. So she got divorced, right? And now you're ready to abandon your wife and child? I swallowed my tears and asked, my voice laced with sarcasm. After a long pause, he nodded. Yes. She left her marriage because of me. I can't betray her. So you can betray me. Betray Leo. The anger surged before I could stop it. I shot to my feet, grabbed the ashtray nearby, and hurled it at him. He cried out as it struck his forehead. Blood spilled instantly, bright red, running down his face. I clenched my fists, staring at him. In that moment, I truly wanted to drag him down with me. End everything, once and for all. Mom, what happened to Dad? Why is he bleeding? Leo's small, frightened voice came from behind me, snapping me back to reality. I wiped my tears quickly and turned to pull him into my arms. It's okay. Dad just bumped his head. Go back to bed. He had clearly been woken by Chad's shout, still groggy, eyes half closed. But Leo still rushed toward his father, worry written all over his face. Dad, are you okay? Chad forced a smile and waved him off. I'm fine. Go back to sleep. Leo kept turning back as I led him toward the bedroom, reluctant but obedient. After I finally settled him, I came back out. Chad was still sitting there, dazed, his hand pressed against his forehead, blood still seeping through his fingers. I took a deep breath and asked quietly, Leo loves you so much. Are you really willing to let him grow up without a home? He opened his mouth to defend himself. Divorce is between you and me. As long as you don't poison him against me, I'll still be his father in his eyes. I'll treat him just like I always have. I let out a cold laugh. Bullshit. Get out. Don't ever come back. He froze. Then when are we filing? I forced down the fury surging in my chest and answered with a bitter smile. You want a divorce? Fine. Bring her here. The two of you can get on your knees and apologize. Walk away with nothing. Then I might consider it. Chad's face darkened instantly. Anna, don't push it. You're being unreasonable. He stood and headed for the door. Don't think refusing a divorce gives you any leverage. I won't be coming back here again. The door slammed behind him. From that moment on, the house belonged only to Leo and me. The wind picked up during the night, the living room window still open. The tears on my face dried quickly in the cold air. And then I realized I couldn't cry anymore. There was only one thought left in my mind: how to make sure Leo and I could live well from here on out. Chapter 8. Maybe it was the shock from the night before, but early the next morning, Leo came down with a fever. I rushed him to the hospital. By the time we returned, Chad had already moved out all his belongings. The only thing he left was a message: "We can still finalize the divorce once enough time has passed." I'd rather end things peacefully. Think it over. I let out a silent breath, swallowing the storm of emotions inside me. I gave Leo his medicine and tucked him in. Then I sat alone at my desk and reviewed every dollar of cash and investment I had. Chad probably had about as much money as I did. There wouldn't be much to divide in a divorce. The house would likely be split down the middle. I decided to keep only a small portion in high-risk investments and move the rest into conservative funds. This was the foundation of Leo's and my future. It had to be secure. As for whether Chad would provide living expenses or child support, I didn't expect much. A man who could walk away from his family wasn't someone I could rely on financially. His decisiveness tore a hole in my heart. The cold wind rushing in stung, but it also cleared my head. It forced me to stand up straight and face life without him. I told myself, "Anna, you've spent 30 years hesitating, looking both ways before every step. It's time to start over." I pulled myself together, gathered my client list, and started making calls, one by one. Maybe fate wasn't done with me yet. A few clients I hadn't spoken to in years actually showed interest in working together again. For the first time in a long while, a spark of determination stirred inside me. Over the past few years, with Leo to care for and Chad sharing the responsibility of keeping the household running, I'd lost some of my drive at work. Turns out, people really can't afford to get comfortable. By the time I finished calling through my client list, it was already noon. Leo was still asleep, but his fever had gone down. I was about to head into the kitchen to make something light for him when the doorbell rang. Chapter 9. When I opened the door, my mother-in-law stood there, eyes red, arms full of takeout containers. Chad had clearly already told them everything. "Can I come in and talk for a minute?" she asked, her voice tentative. I hesitated, then nodded. Despite everything, I couldn't bring myself to shut her out. Over the years, she and my father-in-law had treated Leo and me well. "We've already scolded him," she said, her voice trembling. "His father even slapped him. This is Chad's fault. I never imagined my son would turn into someone like this." I stayed silent. "Anna, he got too comfortable. Lost his head. Can you give him some time? Don't rush into a divorce." I let out a dry laugh. "I'm not the one rushing. Your son is the one who wants to run off and start a life with someone else. He's the one asking me to let him go." She clicked her tongue sharply. "As long as his father and I are alive, he's not getting divorced." My heart felt numb. I didn't want to keep arguing. "Mom, Leo has a fever. Could you help make him something light and stay with him for a bit? I have several video meetings this afternoon." She nodded immediately. "Of course. You eat something first. I'll take care of Leo." She was a good cook. Even though I had no appetite, I forced myself to finish a bowl. I had no intention of cutting ties with them just because of Chad. Leo needed care, and they were still the best people for that. I had to use every resource available to me and build the strength to stand on my own. I remembered taking a personality test years ago. My mentor had laughed and said, "Your feeling score is a 2. Your thinking score is an 18. You're completely rational." After all those years of being in love with Chad, I'd forgotten that part of myself. I'd relied on those 2 fragile points of emotion, believing they were enough to carry me through a lifetime. Now, after everything that had happened, I finally understood. In the face of reality, emotions, love, anger, resentment, meant very little. Feelings were fragile things. Temporary. Easily changed. Chapter 10. Life didn't stop just because Chad was gone. Leo still spent most of his time with his grandparents. I was busier than ever, constantly visiting clients, pushing my work forward. Chad and I still had occasional contact through messages, mainly because I sent him a detailed list of all the household expenses without hesitation. He wasn't dead, and we weren't divorced yet. The least he could do was cover half the expenses. He seemed to accept that arrangement. The money always came through on time. On weekends, he visited Leo at his parents' place a few times. I stopped going there for meals. His parents handled Leo's drop-offs and pickups, so Chad and I never ran into each other. Every time my mother-in-law brought Leo home, she would try to reassure me. He still cares about this family. He just doesn't know how to face you. I let it go in one ear and out the other. What he couldn't let go of was his blood ties, not me. Still, in the quiet of the night, I often couldn't sleep. I kept wondering how the warm little home we'd built had ended up in pieces. Was I really that unbearable? That easy to walk away from? Every time those thoughts crept in, negativity flooded my mind. I could only put on music to dull the sadness, to keep myself from sinking. But I refused to cry. What was the point of crying where no one could hear? Chapter 11. Nearly a year after Chad moved out, my father-in-law was diagnosed with late-stage liver cancer during a routine checkup. Surgery wasn't an option. All they could do was manage it conservatively. I heard my mother-in-law had asked Chad to move back home, but he refused. Instead, he rented an apartment near the place where he was living with his mistress, saying it would make it easier to take care of his parents. My mother-in-law apologized to me again and again. "Anna, I'm so sorry. Once he's a little better, we'll move back and help take care of Leo." I gave a polite smile. "It's okay. I can manage." When people grow old and sick, they naturally want their children close. I couldn't blame them. Around that time, my work finally began to pick up again. I landed a few new clients. Individually, none of them matched the scale of my old one, but together, they were close. I told myself it was better this way. Smaller streams, but steadier. Less risk of everything collapsing at once. I also hired someone part-time to handle basic tasks, so I could spend more time with Leo. He had lost the presence of his father. So I made up for it as best I could. Leo was in preschool now. With his father gone, he seemed to sense the shift in the family. He grew quieter, more thoughtful. From then on, my only contact with Chad's side of the family was a monthly payment transfer. They were probably consumed by my father-in-law's illness. No one came by to see Leo anymore, and I didn't mind the distance. Less than 6 months later, my father-in-law's condition worsened rapidly. Chad came to pick Leo up so he could say goodbye. I watched them leave from the hallway, then asked the housekeeper to go downstairs and bring Leo back when they returned. I never forgot what Chad had said, that he would never come back to this house. So there was no need for me to see him again. Chapter 12. 2 years later, when we finally sat across from each other again, I was calm in a way I hadn't been before. Chad, on the other hand, looked restless, avoiding my eyes, talking about anything but what mattered. I frowned. "Did you bring the divorce agreement?" He didn't answer. Instead, his gaze fell on the car keys on the coffee table. "You learned to drive?" "Yes," I replied coolly. "You used to refuse no matter how many times I told you to learn." "What changed?" There was even a faint smile on his face, as if he were about to make small talk. "Because when things fall apart and you're on the verge of breaking, there's no one to drive for you. You have to rely on yourself." I spoke through clenched teeth, certain he could hear the bitterness in my voice. The smile vanished from his face. After my father-in-law passed away, my mother-in-law's health declined as well. She could only call occasionally, chatting with Leo for a few minutes. Life for Leo and me settled into something quiet, steady. And I was content with that. We hadn't mentioned Chad in a long time. Then, in early winter, Leo fell seriously ill and nearly terrified me. In the middle of the night, he woke crying. "Mom, I don't feel good." Before he could finish, he vomited all over the bed. His face was flushed. I could tell immediately he had a fever. I jumped out of bed and tried to call a ride. 5 minutes passed. No drivers accepted. That was when I realized it was snowing heavily outside. This was bad. Our neighborhood was already hard to get rides from. In weather like this, it was nearly impossible. I increased the fare again and again. Still nothing. Leo kept vomiting, crying that he felt awful. In desperation, I thought of Chad. My mother-in-law had said he lived nearby now, only about 10 minutes away. I called him. He picked up, his voice groggy from sleep. "Hello? Chad, can you drive over right now? Leo's sick. I can't get a ride." My voice came out small, almost pleading. He hesitated, then said, "I just got back from a business trip. I've got a headache. And I have an early meeting tomorrow. Kids get sick all the time. Don't panic. Just offer more money, someone will take the ride eventually. In that moment, I had never hated myself more, or ever believing in a man this cold. I hung up immediately, scooped Leo into my arms, and rushed outside. Snow was still falling. The ground was already covered. It was freezing. But I was drenched in sweat. I ran to the entrance of the complex and begged the security guard for help. He stopped a neighbor who was just returning from overtime and asked if they could drive us to the hospital. Leo kept vomiting in the car, unable to sit upright, slumped weakly against me. At the hospital, the neighbor helped carry Leo into the registration hall and casually asked, "Where's his dad?" The corner of my mouth twitched. "He's gone." After the test results came back, the doctor hesitated before speaking. "His white blood cell count is extremely high. I'm worried there may be another underlying issue. Start the 4 first, then come back tonight for another check. If it's still this elevated, leukemia is a possibility." I froze. My clothes were still damp with sweat, clinging to my skin, and I began to shiver uncontrollably from the cold. Numbly, I helped Leo through the discharge paperwork and got his prescriptions, then sat beside him through the night as he slept against me, the 4 running until dawn. My mind was a blur, like I was thinking constantly, yet unable to grasp a single clear thought. Even in the middle of the night, the pediatric was packed. Parents came and went, most with both mother and father by their child's side. Some even had grandparents with them, families discussing, supporting, caring for one another. The loneliness hit me like a physical ache. After hours of running around, my stomach was empty, and a long-forgotten ache returned, sharp and insistent. The pain snapped me back to reality. There was no time for self-pity. I began calculating. If Leo really had this illness, what would I do next? Which hospital would be best? How many treatments could I afford with the money I had? Would I have to sell the apartment? How could I balance work and caring for a sick child? I pulled out my phone and started typing, scribbling notes, mapping possibilities. The screen blurred as tears fell onto it. I wiped them away and kept going. In every plan I made, Chad wasn't there. I had no expectations of him anymore. But if it came to bone marrow donation or medical costs, even if I had to drag him to court, I wouldn't let him walk away from responsibility. I let out a long breath. No matter what lay ahead, no matter how steep the cliff, I would find a way forward with Leo. Chapter 13. Thankfully, Leo's fever broke the next day, and his white blood cell count dropped too. I bought a car as fast as I could after that and learned to drive. I'll need it again someday. Better to rely on myself than beg anyone else. I told Chad calmly about that night, the night he hadn't been there, the night everything could have gone wrong. He lowered his head for a long time. I really wasn't feeling well that day. But I didn't realize Leo was that sick. If I'd known. He paused. I was wrong. From now on, if anything happens, call me anytime. I won't disappear again. There was real guilt in his voice. Real regret. It almost felt unreal. I curled my lips slightly and steered the conversation back to the divorce. I'm used to this place. It's convenient for Leo's school too. If you agree, I can buy out your half of the apartment. Chad still avoided the topic. I didn't come here to rush into divorce talks. On Leo's birthday, he told me he wanted to go to Japan to see owls. I finally have some time now. Let's take him together. His expression was earnest. I looked it up. There's an owl exhibit where kids can hold them, and there's a fireworks festival he'd love. Let's take him. I couldn't help letting out a short, mocking laugh. His birthday was in May. You were invited during summer break, remember? Now school's been in session for months, and suddenly you want to take him? What, you finally found the time? He went quiet, caught off guard. Summer break. It was that long ago. I walked over to the bookshelf in the living room and picked up a framed photo, holding it out to him. I already took him. You were right, he loved the owl exhibit. We went back 3 times before he was satisfied. Chad froze again. You took him by yourself? You used to be scared to travel alone. You worried about the language barrier, about running into trouble. You were even afraid of what you'd do if Leo got sick overseas. I smiled faintly. Fear is a privilege. When someone is there to support you, you're allowed to be afraid. You can lean on them. But when there's no one behind you, you have no choice but to become braver. And that's when you realize most things aren't as hard as you imagined. Chapter 14. On Leo's birthday, one of his preschool classmates brought him an owl plush as a gift and excitedly described how he'd gotten to touch a real owl in Japan. Leo was fascinated. He remembered that when the three of us used to travel together, Chad had always handled the planning. So he grabbed my phone and called his dad. I didn't know at the time. Later, he asked me in a small, disappointed voice, "Mom, why won't Dad go on a trip with us this summer?" I asked him so early, and he still said he didn't have time. I didn't want to explain adult conflicts to him. When he was older, he would understand on his own. Seeing how crushed he looked, I cursed under my breath and began seriously considering whether I could take him to Japan alone. If I could learn to drive, I could travel too. And I did. I prepared as thoroughly as I could, then took Leo on an 8-day trip by myself. We rode trains from Fukuoka, stopping here and there, eventually making our way to Saga. Leo even got sick at one point, but I had brought medicine with me. After a dose and a night's rest, his fever went down. I navigated with a paper map, stumbling through broken English and trying to make sense of the kanji around me, taking buses to the aquarium in Saga. I ordered a huge platter of grilled oysters, and the two of us ate until we were full and laughing. At one point, I dragged our luggage at full speed through the station just to catch the train to Houston Bosch. Later, sitting on a boat, watching windmills turn in the distance with sunlight warming our faces, I imitated the knight from one of Leo's storybooks and said, "I'm going to challenge them all and defeat every last one." Leo burst into giggles. No one knew that in that moment, I truly meant it. I felt like a knight from another age, fearless, moving forward without hesitation. The bitterness of being abandoned, of being left behind, had already faded. With enough courage, a person can live independently. Even brilliantly. Chapter 15. "So," I said, my patience wearing thin as Chad fumbled for words, "if you're not here to talk about the divorce, why did you come?" Leo would be out of school soon. I needed to get his snack ready before picking him up. Chad suddenly leaned closer, reaching for my hand. "Anna, don't divorce me. Let's start over." I stepped back immediately, putting distance between us. What on earth was he thinking? "I broke up with her," he said quickly. "This time, it's completely over. For real." Once the excitement wore off, I realized she wasn't anything like she said she was. She used to complain that her mother-in-law looked down on her for being from out of town and constantly picked on her. "But my mom got along so well with you." With her, they couldn't even coexist. I thought she loved working out, that she took life seriously. But she didn't want to work at all. She just wanted me to support her, so she could travel and shop all day. And the worst part, when she filed for divorce, she didn't even take her 2 kids with her. For the past 2 years, she's barely gone back to see them. I looked at him with a half smile. He shifted awkwardly. "I'm not like her. I still care about Leo. I've never missed a single support payment you asked for. It's just, every time I tried to visit, she would throw a fit. And then my dad got sick, my mom's health declined, I really couldn't be in 2 places at once. But seeing how well you've raised Leo, I feel relieved. I actually wanted to break things off with her a long time ago. But every time I tried, she would threaten to hurt herself. Said she divorced for me, that I owed her for life." I nodded lightly. "She wasn't wrong. When you left, you said you couldn't betray her." Chad waved his hand in frustration. "I'm not spending my life with someone like that. I've cut everything off. Completely. Anna. I've regretted it for a long time. You're incredible. I don't know how I let myself make such a stupid mistake. I swear, I'll never cheat again. For Leo's sake, give me another chance." I laughed, short, sharp. "Chad, what do you think this is? A place you can walk out of whenever you want and come back to whenever you feel like it?" He answered weakly, "Isn't this our home? I really want to come back." I let out a long breath. "Home. In your eyes, I'm just that pitiful woman who can't stand on her own and has no family to rely on. Waiting every day for you to come back. All you have to do is say, 'I was wrong,' and I'll welcome you with open arms, pretend none of this ever happened. Is that it? You never pushed for the divorce these past 2 years," he said stiffly. "I thought, you were waiting for me. That I still had a place here. So what else was I supposed to do?" I shot back. "Rush to grant your wish and divorce you without a second thought? When my work was at its worst, who would have helped me raise our child? Who would have paid for his life? I paused, then told him the truth with a bitter smile. You're not completely wrong though. When you first left, my business was struggling. I couldn't sleep. I was exhausted, barely holding myself together. If you'd come back then, I might have actually felt relieved. But you didn't. I forced myself to rebuild my work. Then your father got sick, your parents moved away, and without your mom helping, I had to learn how to balance work and raising Leo on my own. When Leo got sick and you wouldn't even drive 10 minutes to help, I knew I had to learn to drive, so I'd never have to ask you again. When he begged you to take him on a trip and you refused, I gathered my courage and took him abroad myself. And I realized, it wasn't that hard after all. While you were gone these past 2 years, when furniture broke, I bought new pieces and assembled them board by board myself. When the toilet clogged and maintenance couldn't fix it, I learned how to repair it on my own. I researched cars across every website, bought one, fought the property management for a parking spot, and even learned how to change a tire from an old mechanic. I handled every school event alone. I helped Leo with his homework, took him to classes, made sure he grew up healthy and steady. I should thank you, really. You gave me the chance to realize something. I can run this home perfectly fine without you. So now tell me. What possible reason is there for me to take back a man who abandoned his wife and child for 2 years? If you have any conscience left, then when we divide the assets, give us a little more. Pay a little more child support. At least Leo will remember you as a decent father. My words hit him one after another. His face turned pale. I figured any man with a shred of pride wouldn't dare ask to reconcile after that. Chapter 16. Chad and I finalized the divorce not long after. Maybe what I said at the end stirred something in him. We split the assets 60-40, with me taking the larger share. I used my savings to buy out his portion of the apartment. He agreed to pay $5,000 a month in child support for Leo. I didn't restrict when he could see his son. A child still needs his father while growing up. Now that he was single again, he seemed to have plenty of time. He visited Leo often, took him out, tried to rebuild their bond. I watched with a calm smile and never stopped him. Whether he was worried about having no one to rely on in old age or simply trying to make up for the fatherly love Leo had missed, it didn't matter. As long as someone was willing to spend time and money on my son, why would I object? Later, he and my former mother-in-law even moved back into our neighborhood. Now Leo had one more place to eat, one more set of people looking out for him. I had more time to focus on networking, visiting clients, growing my business. Things kept getting better. But my only connection with Chad was anything related to our son. Beyond that, I refused to exchange even a single extra word. In this lifetime, I would never step into the same filthy ditch twice, no matter how clean it looked on the surface. Because I knew, underneath, the rot would always still be there. At this point, my love life is a public service announcement. Free of charge.